Hello, you. John Green recently did a Vlogbrothers video in which he created something he is calling Beef Day. It's a deliberate reimagining of old-fashioned feast days. And they're going to be 6 days a year on which he and his family will allow themselves to eat beef. And on the other days of the year, they will not eat beef. The reasoning he gave was that beef is far and away the least energy and resource-efficient food in common consumption. Meat-based food is systemically worse than plant-based foodstuffs in terms of water use, land use, energy use, greenhouse gas production, contaminants, and probably various other metrics I know nothing about. And of all of them, beef is the worst, by quite a long way. He went on to discuss the huge amount of beef eaten annually by Americans, who pretty much top the world in terms of beef consumption, and how he was looking to recalibrate the social norms around eating beef, bringing his own family's consumption down by about 90%, and, since he is an influencer, encouraging anyone else who feels like it to join him. Which brings us to the idea of social norms and the theme of this video. Social norms and how they change, why they change, how you can nudge them in the direction for good or for ill. So John Green seemed very well intentioned, and his plan pretty well thought through. And because of who he is and how big his audience is, I think he's actually got a decent chance of making some headway. But why? And, more importantly, how? He's appealing to the idea that we can deliberately change a social norm and go from eating beef more or less every other day to eating beef only 6 days a year, which seems a big ask. So what's a social norm? And why is he trying to change it? Well, in college they'll tell you that a social norm, or social norms, are the written and more often unwritten playbook of any given society. They are the way things are, the proper and natural ways, at least to the people inside them, since to them the rules seem completely normal, natural, inviolable even. And yet we can see that in fact they change over time. Just look at the changes in smoking habits, in how we treat our children, or how we treat women, or how we think about homosexuality. All so very different now compared to 100 or even to 50 years ago. Changes made en masse to majority thinking and to legal frameworks, based in part upon evidence and in part upon changes in people's understanding of what is right, what is decent, defensible, and fair. But those changes did not just spring up out of nothing. The entire population and the government did not wake up one morning with a different mindset. Rather, they were, and continue to be, the result of the deliberate spread of information, of campaigning, of agitating, and of advocating. The progress that's been made, and yes, I am absolutely going to nail my flag to the mast and call it progress, was instigated by a small number of determined people who made a lot of noise and swayed the opinions of others until things began to change. In 2018, a psychologist by the name of Damon I'll put the details down in the doobly-doo, wrote a paper called How Behaviour Spreads. And in it he concludes that change is not only achievable, as we all know, but that it's not as hard to achieve as you might think. It requires only 25% of a particular population to behave differently, for a tipping point to be arrived at, and for the majority to then swing into line with the new status quo. And to be honest, I'm not entirely sure whether that finding encourages or terrifies me. On the one hand, it suggests that the effort you put in to being the change you want to see, to trying to affect other people, to trying to make things better, can, at a certain point, acquire momentum, and that it doesn't require you to be quite so Sisyphean, to be pushing eternally uphill, to be converting everyone one at a time to your viewpoint until the very last person is converted. It suggests you can make a difference with as few as a quarter of the population on board. On the other hand, that same paradigm holds for people who are, quite frankly, as mad as a box of frogs. People who hold revolting, oppressive, destructive opinions, and who wish to change society in ways that, quite frankly, make me want to vomit. The same mechanism that can work for weal, or good, can work for woe, as they say. Actually, I'm not sure they do say that anymore, outside of old D&D books, but whatever. We can, and we have, moved pretty rapidly from a society where all the cool people smoke to a society where almost everyone acknowledges that cigarettes are, quite frankly, nothing more than coffin nails in a packet that you buy for yourself well before you should need them. We can, and we have, moved from a society where routinely battering your children with belt or cane in the name of discipline was seen to be a form of good, or at least normal, parenting or teaching, to a society where such behaviour will result in widespread condemnation and possibly even prosecution. We can, and have, moved from a society where who you love and how you physically express that love might be illegal and result in stigma or even incarceration, to a time where the wide spectrum of possible relationships and love practices are seen to be the concern of only the consenting adults involved. We can, and we have, moved from times where the direct control over the lives and the bodies of other people is seen as reprehensible, and the deliberate oppression or discrimination of any group simply on the basis of an innate or temporary characteristic, be that race, gender, political affiliation, religion or disability, is unthinkable. This is all good stuff, in my not-so-humble opinion. But here's the kicker. The pendulum can swing, and the techniques that work to produce what I consider progress can also be operated to essentially take us back to the Dark Ages. In the United States of America, today, we can watch things as they go backwards, from a time when the ages-old oppression of women and girls began to be lifted, and they took their place as equal citizens and human beings worthy of the same autonomy and respect as the other half of the human race, to a time when these days a woman with a functioning uterus, quite frankly, has fewer rights than a corpse. And this, like most forms of anti-progress, is the result of a very loud, very obnoxious, very targeted campaigning on the part of a vocal minority, almost all of whom are not the people who are, or indeed ever could be, affected negatively by their campaigning. Not content with simply not having abortions themselves, they actively agitate to legislate in order to force other people to give birth against their wishes and against their best interest, despite the fact that almost 70% of the population of their country does not agree with them. the fact that they have made any headway at all in what is essentially a minority desire to inflict danger, pain, suffering and regret on thousands of random women and girls annually horrifies me. And yet here we are. And although in this specific instant the issue is the bodily integrity and self-determination of women, the issue of forced birthers against the pro-choice lobby, it could be anything. It could be anything at all. There have been previously, and there could still be, anti-homosexuality, anti-democracy, anti-unionisation, anti-vegetarian, anti-ecologist, anti-feminist, anti-Jew movements. You name it, and anything can be the target of deliberate attempts to undermine, to other, and to essentially eradicate something or someone, be that an idea, a behaviour, a group, or an entire people, and all through the alteration of acceptable social norms. And so you see, the problem lies in who is attempting to manipulate society, to sway and shape the thoughts of others, to alter the behaviour of others, and of course, why they want the social norm to shift. Is the proposed shift genuinely progress, or simply a way of someone amassing more stuff they want? Does their aim arise out of a desire to improve the lot of everybody, to reduce harm to everyone, like reducing smoking or making people wear seatbelts? Is it to increase equality, fairness, or opportunity for everyone? Or does it lead to greater control, more money, more power for one group at the expense of another? Does the change they're seeking undo civil liberties for some people, put one group of select people in power, or else maintain their existing stranglehold upon it? Does it impose rules and sanctions and obligations on one group that are not relevant to or are avoidable by another group? Political groups, religions, big business, special interest lobby groups, all of them make use of a horde of sophisticated psychological techniques to sway ordinary people, to create thought bubbles and echo chambers, and often to use dishonest, bad faith argument and logical fallacies, of which more in another video, to create cadres of true believers or enthusiastic ambassadors who will spread the message, quite innocently, and in doing so hide the origins and intentions that might have alerted the rest of us to the possible ungenerous, privileged, or outright oppressive intent of the first actors. And so the nastiness of the few can reach the comparatively low tipping point. The recent convert to a position spreads the message and is followed by the sleepwalking acquiescence of the many, and the 25% becomes all of us. Time and again, history shows us how small movements and some ferocious manipulation of the message and suppression of the truth has led to oppression, to horrific abuse, and even to outright atrocity. The Nazis, the Khmer Rouge, apartheid regimes, pogroms and purges, they don't emerge fully fledged out of nothing. They grow under the less than watchful eyes of the unengaged populace, until you wake up to find it's too late. And that's a lesson of history we could all do well to keep in mind. So I want to end this by emphasising the dual-edged nature of the ability of a small and dedicated minority to create massive social change. On the one hand, it means that what we say and do actually matters. Each one of us can be a catalyst for progress, and so we may even have a moral obligation to participate in civic life, and, as Gandhi said, to be the change you want to see in the world. Together, we can move mountains and collectively make the world a better, more equal, safer place to live. There are no excuses for apathy and disengagement on the grounds, it doesn't matter what I do, since clearly it does. But it also means that we have to keep an eye out. As Jefferson is alleged to have once asserted, the price of liberty may well be eternal vigilance.